The wind howled across the Sahel that morning, carrying with it the scent of dust, heat, and something more electric: anticipation. Ouagadougou's streets bustled like always, motorbikes weaving past fruit vendors and schoolchildren laughing with mouths full of roasted maize. But beneath that ordinary rhythm pulsed something heavier. Security checkpoints lined the roads near the presidential palace. Uniformed guards with sharp eyes and sharper rifles stood motionless, their posture rigid, their fingers never straying far from triggers. A line of unmarked black vehicles rolled through the gates, swallowed by the tall white walls that hid everything behind their silence. Inside, President Ibrahim Traoré stood at the edge of a balcony overlooking the inner courtyard. He was dressed in a simple dark green military tunic, his red beret tucked under his arm. His expression was unreadable as the first aircraft came into view, silver, slow, and alone in the morning sky. He didn't blink. The plane touched down at a private strip east of the city, far from press eyes and political noise. A North Korean flag, tightly folded to avoid attention, was removed before the aircraft even rolled to a stop. Within moments, a door lowered and a group of men in charcoal suits emerged, forming a semicircle on the tarmac. Then he appeared. Jong, leader of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, descended the steps with slow, practiced steps. His face was round, expression fixed in diplomatic neutrality, his hair slicked neatly back. He wore a dark Mao-style suit that shimmered faintly in the sun. Behind him, two guards in identical uniforms flanked him with silent precision. Traoré's aide turned to him. "He's arrived." "I know," the president said quietly, eyes never leaving the balcony. Kim's convoy was already moving through back roads toward the palace, escorted by Burkina Faso's elite counterintelligence unit, unbranded, ruthless, loyal. Nothing had been left to chance. For weeks, Traoré had rehearsed every detail: the security patterns, the escape routes, the media blackout, the translation liaisons. But the one thing no briefing could prepare him for was the moment they would meet. A dictator from the east, a revolutionary soldier from the south, two men born in fire, now walking toward the same table. By the time Jong stepped into the marble reception hall, the air inside had changed. Traoré stood at the center, expressionless, arms behind his back. They didn't smile. They didn't shake hands. They didn't speak. Not yet. They simply looked at each other. For 5 full seconds, they held each other's gaze, measuring the weight, the threat, the mirror of each other's existence. The room was still. A single translator stood between them, nervously watching for any cue, any signal to begin. Then, with one nod, Traoré broke the silence. "Let's talk." In a private chamber beneath the palace, shielded by reinforced concrete and a network of jammers, they sat across from each other with only water and papers between them. No microphones, no notes, only two men, and 1,000 years of consequences. Kim spoke first. "You are young," he said in Korean, the translator's voice trailing just behind. "But your name is loud in our part of the world." Traoré replied evenly. Names become loud when people try to silence them. A pause, a flicker of something in Kim's eyes. Approval? Contempt? Curiosity? "You resist the West," Kim said. "That makes you useful." Traoré leaned forward. "I'm not interested in being useful." Silence. And then a thin smile crept across Kim's face. "You remind me of my grandfather." Traoré's voice didn't shift. "You are not my family." The tension in the room dropped an inch, but it didn't leave. It simply settled, like dust after a grenade. They spoke of uranium, of satellite shielding, of trade corridors masked as humanitarian aid routes. Traoré listened more than he spoke, his fingers occasionally tapping the table, not from impatience, but calculation. Kim outlined a deal. North Korean engineers would assist in building Burkina Faso's first fully encrypted satellite relay station, hidden under the pretext of a research center. In return, they wanted access to westward flight corridors and permission to build an embassy compound fortified well beyond diplomatic norms. Traoré raised an eyebrow. You want a fortress in the middle of West Africa? Kim didn't deny it. We want protection. From them, he said, gesturing vaguely to the sky. There was a long silence. Traoré leaned back. He studied Kim, not as a leader, but as a symbol. Both men knew that this meeting would never be confirmed. The world wouldn't believe it, or worse, it would believe it too well. And yet both were here, alone, unrecorded, unbound by protocol. I don't serve empires, Traoré said quietly, old or new. Kim's face hardened, just for a moment. But then he nodded. Neither do I. And in that single line, something shifted. The silence after Kim's last words lingered like smoke in the underground chamber. Neither man smiled now. The translator glanced back and forth, unsure whether to speak or sit still. It didn't matter. In this room, words were only half the conversation. Traoré stood and walked slowly to the far side of the room. There, he opened a panel in the wall, revealing a narrow window looking into a pitch-black chamber. With a motion, a guard on the other side turned on a light. Inside, on a cold metal chair, sat a man, thin, pale, shivering. His eyes darted wildly around the room, blind to the window, unaware he was being watched. A light bruising framed his face. His hands were shackled. Kim tilted his head slightly. Who is he? The North Korean leader asked. A European contractor, Traoré replied, still looking through the glass. He came to help lay fiber optics for rural schools. That's what he told us. Kim raised an eyebrow. And what did he really do? Traoré turned slowly. He planted 4 beacons near our airbase in Ouagadougou. 2 of them matched signal patterns used in NATO drone coordination. The third relayed data directly to a private server in Luxembourg. The 4th we found buried beneath the foundation of a school he never visited. Kim didn't blink. Traoré stepped closer to the table, resting both hands on the edge. The West doesn't send soldiers anymore. They send software, consultants, foundations, freelance journalists. The jab wasn't subtle, and it wasn't supposed to be. Kim responded with a slight smirk. And you caught him. I made sure he knew we caught him, Traoré said. And that's more powerful than any bullet. Kim leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. You want to humiliate them? Traoré looked him straight in the eye. No, I want to remind them. A pause. Kim's voice dropped lower. Be careful. Reminders can become warnings. And warnings, he trailed off. Traoré finished it for him. Warnings can get you killed. Another silence, but this one held a strange kind of respect. Kim nodded once. Exactly. They were different men, molded by different soils, different ideologies, different pasts. But they were both living monuments of resistance. Symbols in flesh. And that meant they both knew one thing. Power attracts predators. Outside, the sun had begun to set over Ouagadougou. The air turned amber, casting long shadows over the palace walls. From a balcony above, one could see the shifting red of the horizon, a fire not yet burning, but not yet gone. Back in the chamber, Traoré returned to his seat. He poured water for both of them, an oddly intimate gesture, and broke the silence again. You came with an offer. I'll give you one in return. Kim blinked slowly. I'll give you what France, the U.S., and Russia never will. Kim said nothing, but the weight in the room shifted slightly. I'll give you truth, Traoré continued. Not friendship, not allegiance, but truth. Because unlike them, I don't need to lie to stay in power. Kim let out a small exhale through his nose. Truth, he echoed. He said it like a man tasting something unfamiliar. Then he leaned forward. All right, then tell me, what do you want in return? Traoré didn't hesitate. I want autonomy in tech. No backdoors. No engineers that report back to Pyongyang. If your people help us build systems, they stay here. They are monitored. And if I find one antenna pointing to the east, I burn it all. Kim nodded slowly, as if chewing on the demand. And in exchange, you get eyes west of the Sahara, Traoré said. You want to bypass sanctions. You want to test logistics. You want influence. Fine, but not at the cost of my sovereignty. He stood again, this time walking to a digital wall map of West Africa. We are not a launch pad. We are not a pawn. You want a partnership? Then remember, This land doesn't kneel. Kim stood too now, walking slowly beside him. For a moment, they stared at the map together, a strange pair. One born into dynastic power, the other pulled from the trenches of military revolt. Both survivors, both dangerous. And then Kim said something quietly. My father would have hated you. Traoré didn't turn. Then it's good he's dead. Kim actually laughed, short, sharp, but real. And something passed between them. Not trust, not warmth, but clarity. Later that night, the two delegations dined in separate wings of the palace. Kim's staff ate rice and grilled beef in the north wing. Traoré sat with two of his closest advisors in the south. The halls between them were filled with armed silence. But in the underground vault of the intelligence wing, three analysts worked around the clock reviewing intercepted data from a nearby foreign embassy. It appeared a signal had been sent from a rooftop device, disguised as a weather sensor. The signal was traced to an international press agency based in Brussels. The encryption matched Julian Marchand's files. Traoré closed the folder. His jaw tightened. They're already reacting, one advisor said. Let them, Traoré replied. They'll say he's building an axis. They've said worse. He turned to the map again, this time with new eyes. Because if the West had ears in his garden, then it was time to grow something they couldn't understand. 2 hours past midnight, the palace corridors were silent. Outside, the city slept under the weight of secrecy. The last call to prayer had long faded, and only the guards along the southern walls remained alert, silent silhouettes under yellow floodlights, rifles cradled, eyes sharp. In the heart of the presidential palace, beyond a biometric checkpoint and behind a blast door known only to 6 men in the country, sat the real war room. Not the one shown to journalists. The other one, the one where no names were written down. A flickering screen lit up the center table. It displayed a blinking signal, active, live, persistent. Same signature, one of the analysts said. Encrypted relay, Brussels endpoint. They're either testing our response or baiting one. President Traoré stood at the edge of the table, arms crossed, jaw locked. He didn't speak immediately. Behind him, Minister of State Security Yakuba Dembélé paced like a hyena. Short, wide-eyed, always half-drenched in sweat, Dembélé was paranoid, and for good reason. If it's the Belgians, they're using their press contacts again, he hissed. Same play as in Mali. Same shell companies. Always the NGOs. Traoré didn't flinch. It's not Belgium. It's France. They're just not wearing the flag this time. Should we shut it down? No, Traoré said. Let talk. Let tell them what we want them to hear. He turned to the analyst. Feed it our progress report from the old fiber optic installation. Hide it under civilian tags. Include the Chinese technical delay logs. The analyst hesitated. We're fabricating intelligence. No, Traoré said firmly. We're correcting assumptions. A pause. Then he added, if they want to play with shadows, we'll give them a theater. That same morning, while the air was still heavy with Sahel heat, Kim Jong-un was escorted to a restricted compound on the palace's east wing. He wore a linen robe instead of his usual dark suit, a quiet nod to local custom, though no one missed the 5 bodyguards who shadowed his every step. They were shown a corridor lined with photographs, Sankara in fatigues, Samori Touré raising a rifle, Kwame Nkrumah shaking hands with peasants, and finally, Traoré, surrounded by dust and fire during the uprising. Kim stopped in front of that last one. A myth built in 4 years, he said. The translator repeated the words. The Burkinabe aide standing nearby said nothing. Your president, Kim continued. He has a soldier's face. But his mind, he didn't finish the sentence. Instead, he turned toward the door at the end of the hall. Inside, Traoré waited, alone, seated at a plain wooden table. No gold, no flags, just men in silence. This time, Kim spoke first. I admire what you built in such a short time. Traoré gave a small nod. Speed is necessary when survival is temporary. Still, Kim said, the fire around you will grow. It already has, Traoré replied, and I plan to walk through it. They exchanged a long glance. Then Kim said something unexpected. You have a leak. Traoré's eyes narrowed slightly. Kim continued, Someone on your security council forwarded a briefing to Abidjan. It was intercepted by one of my satellites. The same file appeared 36 hours later in Paris. Traoré didn't blink. Ooh, Kim didn't answer. He didn't have to. A flash drive was placed gently on the table. Traoré looked at it, but didn't touch it. Why tell me this? He asked. Because if you burn, Kim said flatly, I lose my bridge. The words cut through the air like glass. Trust was not what passed between them. What passed was necessity. And necessity was more dangerous than loyalty. Because loyalty could be bought. Necessity demanded survival. Traoré stood up and turned away, thinking. Not out of fear, but calculation. Someone inside his circle had breached the wall. And worse, had done it during the summit. That wasn't espionage. That was treason. And treason required answers. He turned back to Kim. You said you intercepted the file? Yes. Then I assume you read it. Kim smiled faintly. Of course. Traoré nodded once. Then you know what I'm willing to do. Kim's smile faded. He leaned forward. I just want to know one thing, he said. What? If I ever fall, would you help me get up? Traoré stared at him. No. He let the silence stretch. I wouldn't help you up, but I might help you fall slower. Kim leaned back again. This time he laughed. Not mockingly, but with recognition. In that case, he said, this may be the beginning of a very honest relationship. Meanwhile, in a villa east of the city, far from guards, eyes, and walls, someone was watching the same blinking signal from a different screen. A French agent, embedded as an international education consultant, adjusted his earpiece. He just got the drive, he said. A voice crackled in response. Does he suspect the source? Not yet. Maintain radio silence. Wait for phase 2. The agent nodded. Then he glanced toward a satellite phone in the corner of the room, its screen flashing an incoming message. Tomorrow, 4:15, National Power Grid. He stared at it for a long time. Outside, a goat bleated in the distance. Inside, the next step of a war no one had officially declared began ticking into place. At exactly 4:15, the lights in Ouagadougou flickered once. Just a flicker, like a hiccup in the darkness. But then, the silence that followed was too deep. And across the capital, in homes, hospitals, and control towers, screens blinked once, then went black. 3 seconds later, the grid collapsed. The presidential palace was thrust into darkness. Backup generators humming to life with a short delay. Emergency lighting casting flickering shadows across marble floors. Guards raised weapons. Radios crackled to life. Somewhere near the East Wing, a dog began barking uncontrollably. President Traoré was awake before the first report arrived. He stood in his bedroom, barefoot, staring out at the pitch-black skyline, already dressing as the knock came at his door. North Sector hit, the security chief said. Transformer station fire. Multiple surges before shutdown. We believe it was triggered from inside the grid. A cyber attack? Traoré asked, already pulling on his boots. We don't know. But what? A drone was spotted 5 minutes before the collapse. Unmarked. Low altitude. Fast exit. French tech or Israeli. We're still reviewing the feed. Traoré didn't speak. He knew what this was. Not just sabotage, a message. He made his way quickly to the command corridor. The red lights, lining the walls, gave the hallway the look of a submarine in war. Soldiers lined both sides, their eyes dark, adrenaline pulsing through their hands. But then another voice echoed down the hallway, one no one expected. He's missing. Traoré stopped cold. Ooh, Kim Jong-un. Silence. He's not in his room. His guards are unconscious. No sign of forced entry. No cameras. It's like he vanished. The room froze. Traoré's mind moved faster than the panic in the corridor. This wasn't just about destabilizing Burkina Faso. This was about breaking the alliance before it could form. If Kim vanished under Traoré's watch, if North Korea believed for even a moment that Burkina Faso had betrayed him, it would ignite something that could not be contained. Traoré didn't wait. He turned sharply and barked a single order. Lock down the entire city. Ground all aircraft. Intercept satellites. No one leaves. No one enters. He paused. Then, with a voice lower than before. "And find him." 2 hours earlier, the compound had been quiet. Kim had retired to his secured wing with only 3 guards posted outside. No one heard the soft thud of knockout gas canisters dropped through the ventilation system. No one saw the figures in black scaling the west wall, silent and deadly, faces hidden, movements surgical. By the time the guards collapsed, the intruders were already inside. They moved with precision, straight to Kim's room. A brief struggle, a sharp injection, then silence. Kim's body was wrapped, bound, and loaded into a civilian laundry truck that exited the palace under false diplomatic clearance codes. Only one man saw the truck. A boy, barefoot, no older than 9. He slept near the loading dock, selling bottled water by day and hiding in shadows by night. He watched the license plate, memorized it, and when the truck drove off into the early dawn, he didn't run or scream. He waited until the palace guards turned again. Then he slipped quietly through the corridor, toward the only man he believed could stop what he had just seen. Traoré stood in the palace courtyard, listening to 8 different voices speak at once. Helicopters were ready. Roadblocks had been established, but no confirmed trail. "His own people are panicking," Dembele said. "They think we double-crossed them. We need time." And A began. "We don't have time," Traoré snapped. And then the boy appeared. Small, dusty, out of breath. The guards moved to intercept, but Traoré raised his hand. "Let him speak." The boy walked forward, unsure but unafraid. His voice trembled. "I saw the truck." The courtyard fell silent. He described it, the number, the route, the time. He even mimicked the strange white sticker on the side panel. One of the soldiers sketched it quickly. Within minutes, they traced it to a cleaning service, one contracted not by the palace, but by an NGO headquartered in Belgium. Traoré felt his blood turn cold. The same endpoint from the intercepted signal. It wasn't just a spy ring. It was an extraction team. And Kim Jong-un, the most heavily guarded man on the continent at that moment, had been stolen. Traoré turned to the radio officer. "Find that truck." "How?" "Use everything. Satellites, drones, street cameras. And if that fails, use the people." He pointed at the boy. "Start with him." In a warehouse on the outskirts of the city, Kim Jong-un slowly began to wake. The room was dark, lined with soundproof foam. One of his wrists was chained to a pipe. His eyes adjusted slowly. A man sat across from him, white, clean-shaven, and motionless. The man didn't speak. He just raised a small tablet. On it, a single line of text glowed. "We are saving you from yourself." Kim stared at the screen, then at the man. He understood. This wasn't kidnapping. This was erasure. Back at the palace, Traoré paced in the intelligence room, eyes fixed on a digital map of Ouagadougou. Dembele was on the phone, coordinating with local resistance groups. Helicopter teams swept the northern and eastern industrial sectors, but the minutes were slipping through their fingers. And then static. A voice crackled in on a restricted frequency. "We have visual on the truck. Abandoned, near a textile warehouse. No heat inside. Confirming entry." Traoré didn't wait for the full message. He grabbed his vest. "Mobilize Team 1. I'm going." "But," "I said I'm going." Dembele hesitated, then handed him a pistol. "Bring him back." Traoré didn't respond. He was already moving. Outside, the black SUV roared to life, and with it, so did the final phase of the hunt. The warehouse loomed like a corpse on the edge of the city, silent, burnt at the edges, and long forgotten by commerce. A graveyard of rusted textile machines lay buried under tarps and years of dust. But now it breathed again, guarded, humming, and cold. The SUVs stopped 300 meters away. President Ibrahim Traoré stepped out first. He wore a lightweight tactical vest under his plain green fatigues. No medals, no insignia, only a sidearm and a deep, calculated stillness in his eyes. "We breach in 5, said the team leader, voice clipped, jaw clenched. "No," Traoré said. He pulled a flash drive from his pocket and handed it to the radio operator. "Play this frequency on all nearby radios." Loud. The man hesitated, then obeyed. A quiet hiss went out across emergency radios, tapping into rogue airwaves. And from within the warehouse, a change. Inside, the man watching Kim Jong-un shifted in his seat. He heard the sound, barely audible through the concrete walls, but unmistakable. It was a sequence, a code. One Kim recognized instantly. 3 pulses. 1 pause. 3 again. Burkina Faso was not here to negotiate. It was here to take him back. Kim sat upright, the chain around his wrist clinking slightly. He said nothing, but he smiled. The man across from him stood up. His expression remained blank, but his hand moved to his belt. A concealed syringe, laced with something silent and final. But before it could be drawn, boom, the side door exploded inward. Smoke, shouting, boots. Burkinabe Special Forces swarmed the corridor with lethal precision. Clear left, right stacked, and then a voice shouted, "He's here." Kim Jong-un was still seated. The chain had snapped at the anchor point in the blast. He blinked slowly as a soldier unfastened the cuff. Then he looked up and saw him. Traoré, calm, standing like stone in the chaos. Kim gave the faintest nod. "You took long enough. I'm not the one who got kidnapped," Traoré said. Kim stood, stretching his shoulders with a grunt. "Is the power back?" Traoré glanced over his shoulder. "Almost." They moved fast. Within minutes, the 2 leaders were evacuated to separate armored vehicles, flanked by armed outriders. A second team remained to sweep the warehouse. Within the hour, 2 foreign bodies were discovered in a hidden room, both shot execution style. One had a French passport. The other wore a patch from an NGO long suspected of fronting for European intelligence. Back at the palace, in the war chamber lit now by full power and a rising sun, Traoré stood before a wall-sized map and drew a thick red line across a secure zone just south of the capital. "We move our assets here. If they want to play dirty, we bury the board." Dembélé nodded, exhausted. "The public, they'll hear what we tell them. A foreign-sponsored sabotage attempt. No names, but enough truth to remind them why we exist." And Kim. Traoré hesitated. "He'll be leaving soon." In a private room later that day, Traoré stood facing Kim for what might have been the last time. Kim had changed clothes. His eyes were tired but alert. A cut on his left temple was bandaged neatly. "No one has ever rescued me before," he said, voice low. Traoré shrugged. "No one's ever tried to take you while I was watching." Kim chuckled, but the weight of the past hours hung heavy between them. Traoré stepped forward. "They wanted to break this before it began, to make it look like I invited you to die here." Kim's eyes sharpened. "They failed. But the next one," Traoré continued, "won't be so clean." Kim nodded. "Which means we must move faster." Traoré sat. "Then say what you came to say. What you really came to say." Kim looked down for a moment. Then he reached into his coat and slid forward a sealed envelope. Traoré took it, opened it, and read. Then he looked up. "This is an offer of nuclear material." Kim nodded once. "Low yield. For defense research. Silent. Undetectable. Untraceable. Yours." Traoré stared at the paper. "I thought you were just here to build satellites." "I was," Kim said. "But now, we're both at war." Traoré folded the paper. Then he said quietly, "Accepting this means we can't turn back." "I know. It means when they come again, they come to finish the job." "I know." Traoré leaned forward. "And what if I say no?" Kim's voice turned to stone. "Then you stand alone against the same machine that once turned my country into ash." A long pause. Outside, the courtyard was silent. Then Traoré nodded once. "We'll take it." Kim exhaled through his nose. Not relief. Resolution. He stood, placed both hands behind his back, and said the only thing he could. "Then, Mr. President, we are now brothers." Traoré didn't rise. He only spoke one last time. "No, Kim. We are weapons." The package was small, roughly the size of shoebox, sealed in a lead-line titanium casing with no markings and no electronics. To the untrained eye, it looked like a forgotten diplomatic courier crate, one of hundreds that moved daily through Africa's quiet corridors of power. But this one held enriched uranium, enough to begin a defense project that would signal to the world Burkina Faso was not to be touched. The convoy was modest by design. No military trucks, no helicopters, Just a black Land Cruiser with diplomatic plates, trailed by two unmarked Hilux pickups. The route, west, through the forest corridor, toward a former colonial airstrip near Baromo. From there, the crate would be flown via unregistered cargo to a subterranean vault buried in the Sahel. No one was supposed to know, but someone knew. An hour after departure, the convoy crossed into a narrow stretch of land just beyond Kambasiri, fertile ground reclaimed by the state, now turned into low brush and red clay. The lead vehicle slowed for a herd of goats. The driver honked twice. The boy herding them didn't move. He stared. That's when the drone appeared. Silent. Low. Not military grade. Something civilian, barely larger than a bird. But as it passed over the Land Cruiser, it released a burst of static interference. The Land Cruiser's engine stuttered. Then, boom. A buried IED exploded beneath the lead escort vehicle. It flipped sideways, catching fire midair before slamming into the ground. The Land Cruiser swerved, tires screeching across dry dirt. The final vehicle stopped, and soldiers leapt out. Ambush. North Ridge. Automatic fire cracked across the trees. Shadows moved. Muzzles flashed. It wasn't a militia. This was clean, professional Western. The kind of hit designed to look like it came from nowhere. One of Traoré's men grabbed the crate from the Land Cruiser, diving behind a fallen tree. Another was hit in the leg, crawling toward cover. Smoke choked the road. Screams. Gunfire. Silence. Then suddenly, the shooting stopped. Footsteps. Then came the voice. French. Put down the case. Walk away. You get to live. The soldier with the crate said nothing. He looked at the lock. Biometric. Voice activated. Set to Traoré's signature only. He grinned through bloodied teeth. Then he triggered the beacon. Back in Ouagadougou, a console near the president's desk began flashing red. Dembélé burst into the room, eyes wide. They've hit the transport. Traoré was already moving. Scramble the air unit. We're not losing it. By the time the chopper arrived, the scene was quiet. Burnt metal. Dead men. A broken case, still locked. No sign of the attackers. But one of Traoré's guards, the one who had triggered the beacon, was still alive, barely. He had dragged the crate 60 meters into a dried-out irrigation ditch and buried it beneath palm leaves. When they found him, he whispered just 2 words. They knew. Then he died. Hours later, Traoré stood with Kim Jong-un in the reinforced map room. The crate sat between them, unopened but intact. Kim stared at the scorch marks. They hid it, but didn't take it. Traoré nodded. Because they couldn't open it. Kim raised an eyebrow. So they ran. No, Traoré said. They wanted us to know. He stepped back, turning to face the map of West Africa again. This time lit with overlapping heat signals, intercepted radio bursts, and low-orbit satellite scans. They wanted to show us they can reach anything. Anywhere. Kim was quiet for a long time. Then, you still want to go forward? Traoré didn't hesitate. Now more than ever. Kim stepped closer. Then understand what this means. The next time they strike, they won't stop at sabotage. I know, Traoré said. They'll come for the palace. Kim placed a hand on the case. Then build faster. Hide deeper. And prepare to strike back harder. Traoré didn't respond. He already was. In the intelligence annex below the palace, 2 analysts decoded a recovered message from the attackers' camp. The source was hidden behind several layers of European proxy servers. But one line stood out, printed in cold, perfect English. Burkina is no longer neutral. Containment required. Leverage at all costs. Traoré read it once. Then, for the first time in weeks, he locked the door behind him, sat alone at his desk, and closed his eyes. They were going to escalate. And he had just crossed the last line of return. 2 days after the failed ambush, the skies above Ouagadougou turned shade darker. Not with clouds, but with predators. Unmarked surveillance drones began circling the capital, lingering just at the edge of radar thresholds. They weren't there to strike. Not yet. They were there to listen, to count bodies, to measure fear. Inside the presidential palace, every corridor now echoed with orders. Doors were sealed. Communications were rerouted through military satellites. And in the reinforced war chamber below the palace, The real preparations had begun. Traoré stood before a digital map. Red dots surrounded the capital. Blue signals blinked from rooftops, friendly snipers stationed quietly across key government buildings. In the corners of the screen, unknown pings, silent and moving. Kim Jong-un sat beside him. He wasn't smiling anymore. "You should evacuate your capital," Kim said in a low voice. Traoré shook his head. "If I leave now, they win without a shot. They'll come anyway." "Yes," Traoré said, "but I want them to come here. To my ground. To my fire." He turned. "They think they can land in the night and break my door." "And can they?" Kim asked. Traoré didn't blink. Only once. That night, a rainless wind swept across the city. At 2:17 a.m., power in Sector 3 flickered again. This time it wasn't the grid. A sniper's scope had been hacked. Then the drone arrived. No markings. No lights. High altitude. It dropped one object, small, metallic, silent. It landed on the roof of a ministry building and latched itself to the antenna. Within seconds, it began transmitting localized jamming frequencies. The next wave was digital. Government servers began to blink, reset, then freeze. Email networks collapsed. Public cameras began looping ghost footage. For a few minutes, even air traffic control went blind. And then, the breach team activated. 10 men, all wearing black combat uniforms. Western gear, non-standard rifles, thermal masks. They weren't from any recognized military. They weren't here to capture. They were here to end Ibrahim Traoré. The first breach happened at Gate 4. Guards were cut down in 10 seconds. The attackers moved in synchronized silence, disabling surveillance, shooting only when necessary. They moved toward the East Wing, toward the war room. Inside, Traoré was already moving. He slammed a fist on the security panel. All floors, engage code MERN. Every light in the palace turned red. Steel barriers slammed shut in hallways. Defense turrets activated in walls disguised as art. Subsonic alarms emitted painful frequencies through enemy earpieces. And yet they kept coming. 2 breach teams made it into the lower level. One soldier threw a gas grenade into the secondary stairwell. Another fired at the backup generators. But what they didn't expect was resistance. Burkinabe commandos emerged from hidden chambers with thermal visors and close-quarters gear. The battle was sudden, brutal, and wordless. In one corridor, 3 attackers were killed in under 10 seconds. A 4th was captured alive, gasping, bleeding, unconscious. Traoré himself joined the counter team, his sidearm gripped with steel nerves. He moved with practiced calm, room to room, never flinching at the sound of bullets. When he reached the vault where Kim had been moved hours earlier, he saw the smoke, but not blood. Kim stood, back against the wall, holding a rifle. One attacker lay dead at his feet. "I told you," Kim said flatly, "they'd come. You killed him." He aimed first. Traoré looked at him for a moment, then said, "Welcome to West Africa." By sunrise, the palace was secure. The dead had been removed, the injured treated, the captured interrogated. One spoke. He wasn't American. Not exactly. But he carried a device linked to a CIA operations cell in Djibouti. He had a tattoo in Latin, Silentio Vincimus, in silence we conquer. He didn't resist. He just smiled and said one sentence. The next wave won't knock. That morning, Traoré addressed his inner circle. He wore the same uniform, the same calm, but something in his voice had changed. They've tried sabotage. They've tried kidnapping. They've tried assassination. And they have failed. He looked around the table. "I want a new protocol. Starting today, we go silent. No digital trails. No internal memos. All operations verbal. All orders hand-delivered." He paused. "They want to hear our fear. We give them nothing." Kim sat with him afterward, sipping thick black coffee. "You're becoming colder," he said. Traoré nodded. "Good. You know what comes next?" "Yes," Traoré said. "Collapse. Or clarity." Kim stood. "Then let me offer the next piece." He pulled out a second file. On it, blueprints, codes, diagrams, a design for an underground missile launch silo, disguised as a flood management facility. Traoré didn't flinch. "This is your price?" he asked. Kim shook his head. "This is my investment." Traoré stared at the file. Then quietly, "Then let's build it." The cameras rolled in silence. No dramatic music. No flags behind him. Just Traoré, seated at a plain wooden table, wearing his old army fatigues. No rank. No medals. Just the truth in his voice. The national broadcast began at exactly 2000 hours. Every TV, radio, phone, and satellite feed across Burkina Faso opened with the same image. Their president, their lion. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't shout. He spoke like a man addressing his family. "To the people of my country and to those beyond our borders who are listening, let me be clear. We have been attacked, not by armies, but by shadows. Men who wear no uniforms. Men who serve no flag. Men who believe Africa has no right to stand on its own." He looked straight into the camera. "They tried to poison our alliances. They tried to assassinate our guests. They tried to end me. But we are still here. And now we are awake." He paused. "To the powers that move these agents, I know you're watching too. We are not your pet project. We are not your observation field. We are not yours. A breath. This is not a declaration of war. It is a declaration of vision. We will build. We will defend. And if necessary, we will strike first." The feed ended. No applause. No music. Only silence. And that silence? It shook the world. Across Paris, Washington, and Brussels, diplomats scrambled. "He didn't name us," said one advisor. "He didn't have to," replied another. Emergency sessions were held. Satellite logs reviewed. Private memos drafted. But in the shadows, a different conversation unfolded. One agency, whose name wasn't allowed in official budgets, intercepted a new line of code embedded in a weather satellite. A Burkinabe signal. Short, direct, brutal. It read, "If you come again, we'll come for you." While the world whispered, Traoré acted. Inside a repurposed communications center deep in the south of the country, a team of elite Burkinabe cyber operatives launched Project Minaret. It wasn't a weapon. It was a mirror. They didn't attack American servers. They cloned them. They built a near-perfect replica of a CIA-controlled African logistics node, from metadata to login structure, and waited. Within 3 days, a curious French operative tried to enter the system. They let him in, and through that single breach, they launched the first African-initiated cyber trace on Western soil in modern history. They didn't steal. They listened, and what they heard changed everything. An operation scheduled to launch from Niger. Not drones, not agents, diplomats. A forged peace conference, hosted by a neutral European NGO. The goal: lure Traoré out of Burkina Faso and intercept him mid-flight, under the guise of a hijacking. The goal wasn't to kill him. It was to erase him, disappear the body, blame regional terrorists, deny everything. The same tactic used against Lumumba, Sankara, Gaddafi, now scheduled for Traoré. He read the intercepted documents in silence. Then he circled one name, an advisor listed in the EU delegation for the Niger summit. French, well-funded, last seen in Bamako, now flying to Côte d'Ivoire. Traoré looked up at his intelligence chief. "I want him." "How do you want it done?" "Quiet. Loud. I don't care." He paused. "But I want him to know it's me." 3 days later, in a high-rise apartment in Abidjan, the advisor returned from dinner. He entered his flat, unlocked the door, poured a glass of wine, and saw it, an envelope on his kitchen table. He hadn't left it there. No sign of forced entry. Nothing on the cameras. No alarms triggered. Inside the envelope, a single photo, his own face, sleeping, stamped in red ink with 3 words. "We are awake." No threat, no blood, just a warning that pierced deeper than any bullet. By morning, he had left Africa. His entire mission collapsed. Back in Ouagadougou, Kim Jong-un prepared to leave. His plane was fueled. His staff briefed. His engineers remained behind, disguised as civilian consultants working on data infrastructure. Before boarding, he stood with Traoré one final time on the palace runway. "You've made enemies," Kim said. Traoré nodded. "I made them before you arrived." Kim extended a hand. This time, Traoré took it. "We built something here," Kim said. "Yes," Traoré replied. "But now I have to protect it." Kim looked toward the plane. "They'll try again." "I know," Kim smirked. "They always do." And with that, he boarded. The ramp lifted. The plane vanished into the hot sky. And Ibrahim Traoré was now alone with the weight of the storm approaching. But he stood straight. He didn't flinch, because he was ready. The first detonation didn't sound like an explosion. It sounded like a power surge, a low hum that rolled through the foundation of the Ministry of Infrastructure and shattered every window in a 3-block radius. Seconds later, flames rose over Sector 5, and then silence, until the second blast ripped through the air, this time near the central bank. A surgical strike, not meant to collapse the building, but to erase its memory. Inside the presidential palace, Traoré had already thrown on his vest before the first call came in. "Double explosion," his aide shouted over the radio. "Confirmed sabotage. Fire teams engaged. We're evacuating the south quarter. Any aircraft?" No applause. "But there's movement in the west. Unmarked vehicles approaching from the foreign zone." Traoré slammed the desk. "They're not just attacking. They're moving in." In a hidden surveillance room deep beneath the palace, the real story unfolded. A camera feed, silent, black and white, showed 2 figures walking through a secured corridor. One was a palace guard. The other was Minister Yakuba Dembélé. He wasn't supposed to be there. He wasn't supposed to be carrying a data capsule. He wasn't supposed to be heading toward the encrypted vault where the Kim files were stored. And yet there he was. "Trace him," Traoré ordered. The analyst's fingers flew. "Too late," she said. "He's already inside." Dembélé inserted the capsule into the core port. Lines of code danced across the screen. A countdown began. 015, 014, 00:13. He didn't look back. He simply said, "I served this country when it still knew its place." He pulled a pistol from his belt. But before he could turn, Traoré stepped into the room. No guards. No words. Just a single shot. Straight through Dembélé's hand. The pistol clattered to the floor. Dembélé screamed, dropped to his knees, clutching the bleeding stump. "I built this machine," he cried. "No," Traoré said, stepping forward. "You just kept it running while others bled." He kicked the capsule out of the port, then looked at the countdown. 002, 001, 00, aborted. The screen blinked black. Data intact. In the aftermath, 10 more raids were launched across the city. Foreign assets were arrested. Hidden rooms in embassies exposed. Weapons, hard drives, forged credentials. They hadn't been planning a war. They had been preparing for a regime change. And it had already begun from the inside. But the center held. 3 days later, in the National Assembly Hall, Traoré stood before the entire cabinet. Around him, silence. Above him, scars in the ceiling from blast tremors. In his hand, a printed dossier. "This," he said, "is the last time we allow foreign soil to grow inside our roots." He laid it down. "I want every ministry audited, every foreign consultant vetted, every private contract suspended until reviewed." No one objected. They knew. They had felt it. The ground had shifted. The mask had fallen. And in its place, the eyes of the lion. Traoré turned. "One more thing." He looked straight at the room. "I'm not a king, and I don't want a crown. But if you think I will kneel, you are mistaken. A beat. From this day on, we stand alone, or we do not stand at all." That night, the lights came back on in Sector 5. The fires were out. The dead were named. And the people did not riot. They stood, because for the first time in a generation, their leader had not asked for peace. He had demanded dignity. And now, the world watched as Africa, in the hands of a soldier from the Sahel, began to rewrite its future. The sun rose slowly over Ouagadougou. For the first time in weeks, the sky was clear. No smoke, no drones, no distant echoes of war. Just light. Hot, golden, unforgiving. President Ibrahim Traoré stood on the balcony of the rebuilt war wing. Below, workers hammered scaffolding into the marble steps. Cracks from the recent blasts had already been repaired. New flags, black, green, red, whipped in the wind. But it wasn't the building that mattered now. It was the message. In his hand was a letter. Short, handwritten, addressed to no one, but meant for everyone. He placed it into a steel envelope and handed it to his aide. Send it. Every capital, every embassy, every platform. The aide hesitated. Sir, it'll burn every remaining bridge. Traoré's voice was low. Then let them burn. The letter arrived in the inboxes of presidents, spies, journalists, and warlords. It was translated into 37 languages within 24 hours. It read, "We know your names. We know your methods. And we are no longer pretending. Africa will no longer ask for a seat at your table. We are building our own. And should you come again to take, know this. We do not kneel. We do not beg. We do not forget. We defend. We create. We rise." Ibrahim Traoré, president of Burkina Faso. At the same time, a satellite passed over the Sahel. From 150 kilometers above, it captured a simple shape, newly constructed, carved into the desert near the Niger border. A circle, surrounded by reinforced concrete. 6 air vents. 2 retractable towers. To some, it looked like an irrigation project. To others, it looked like a launch silo. The image was leaked, and the world? It panicked. News channels blared speculation. Debates erupted in UN chambers. Intelligence agencies activated full surveillance on Burkina Faso. But no one had answers, because Traoré didn't offer any. In the final days of that month, Kim Jong-un sent a sealed transmission from Pyongyang. It was a single sentence. "They now fear what you might do, and that is enough." Traoré never replied. He simply filed it and walked to the hill outside the capital, where a new monument was being built. Not of himself, not of soldiers, but of a lion, standing, facing west, its mouth open, its eyes watching. Forever. The end. But not the conclusion. That belongs to history.